Welcome to the Great Blockchain Debate featuring Dead Bankers Society.
Woohoo! Thank you. Bright lights. Thank you, everybody, for being here. While you guys are sitting here, can you just go in the hallway and get more people in? Because you'll need all the support, or these gentlemen will need all the support they can get. Again, thank you for being here. I know previous session ran a little bit over, and I've noticed they were also talking about DeFi, but I can guarantee you this is way, way better session. Just, no pressure or anything for them. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, we're going to start very quickly as we don't want to go over. So this is a debate-style presentation. Again, we are talking about the merits of distributed finance or DeFi versus traditional finance, right? So we have Ben on one side of this argument, and then we have John on the other side of this argument. I have a very easy role this time around. All I have to do is be the stage decoration and say things once in a while. Typically, I'm on one of the argument sides. So the way it's going to work is, remember, for the purpose of the debate, these gentlemen do have to take the polar opposite views. It doesn't mean that that's what they believe in real life, but that's what they have to do. Before we start, the way it's going to work is that we're going to have an opening poll. So for those of you that have your phones handy, do not hide the phone away. You will need to answer one question in the poll. So get that out. I'm going to open the poll in a minute there. And then once that, they're going to go through their opening statements, the arguments, and then the closing polls. So you're ready with your phones. I just opened the first poll, and the question is really simple. Is decentralized finance going to replace traditional finance? Yes or no? So that's what I want everybody to answer. And then while you guys are doing that, just a little bit of a background. You can see that this is a presentation by Dead Bankers Society. And again, we rebranded this year. We used to be known as FinTech Fight Club, and we rebranded to Dead Bankers Society. And one of my good friends in the industry said that makes sense because we're all bankers or former bankers and we're dead inside. So, this is kind of, we're making fun of ourselves because let's admit it. Most of us are either bankers in the past that were reborn to be in the fintech space or other spaces, and that's kind of where we are. So to that point, we have a handy-dandy helper, Greg Lloyd, in the audience, who, in the spirit of rebranding, is going to throw T-shirts randomly in the audience so you can have those cool T-shirts. Oh, good job, Greg. Good job. That went to no one.
Very athletic.
Thank you. Thank you. Very effective. Oh, that was totally, wow.
No man's land.
Wow, okay. All right, so with that, I think all of you guys had a chance to answer the polls. We have, is decentralized finance going to replace traditional finance? We have 21% is yes, 57% no, and 22% undecided. So this is fantastic. That gives a lot of room to wiggle for our participants. I'm going to go ahead and close the polls. So with that, we're going to start with our opening arguments. John, the floor is yours.
Why, thank you, Zoya. Wow, sorry. Give me just a moment to work through my voice with this mic. I generally don't need a mic to even speak to a room this size, so apologies if I deafen a few of you. Before I get into my argument, I want to level set 3 pieces of technology that make up what, for the baseline of this conversation, is going to be considered decentralized finance or DeFi to save myself time the rest of the way out. 1, blockchain. 2, smart contracts. 3, decentralized applications, or dApps. I don't get to name this stuff, just to be clear. So working through blockchain, what you do or don't know of it, for the concept of this conversation, let's just assume that it is a bunch of computers, let's call them nodes. They work through to validate and gain consensus, the distributed ledger technology piece that really wraps blockchain technology together to be a quality technology to use as a mode of saving and lending. What ends up happening is you get this consensus, and from there, you get rewarded for those that are participating. This actually creates an economy around blockchain itself, right? It's not Microsoft supporting it on Azure. It's a standalone piece that peers throughout the world are actually supporting and working through it. 2, Smart contracts. Simple as it sounds, just really the T's and C's, the terms and conditions of a binding contract between two individuals built on blockchain. These two pieces lead me to my third, dApp, which is really just a decentralized application, and that is nothing more than software that's built for purpose, whether that's going to be saving and lending or other variations that I'll get through. So back to what I should have started with is my position is that DeFi not only has what it takes to replace traditional finance or TradFi from here on out, but that the ecosystem is already here and it's thriving. And now, I'm going to go ahead and well, actually before there, decentralized finance, decentralized financial applications, working through that. But I'm going to go ahead and let Ben take a chance and let him plant the seeds of deceit.
Awesome. Oh, wow, okay. Thanks, John. My stance today is that our current financial system, our traditional financial system, TradFi, is here to stay. To start, I want to give a brief history lesson on where our traditional financial system started. In 1791, Alexander Hamilton created the first bank in the United States. That kicked off a period referred to as the free banking era. During this time, the banking sector was unregulated, and thus the system was wracked with fraud. This all came to an end in 1863 when the US government stepped in and first started regulating banks. And from that point, over the next 160 years, traditional finance has evolved, matured, and grew to create the wealthiest society in the history of the world. Not only that, it's integrated itself in our day-to-day lives. And I know everyone likes to think that banks and financial institutions are these archaic dinosaurs that don't like to innovate, but I don't think that's true. I can walk into a store today, and instead of using cash or a check or even my credit card, I can pay just by tapping my phone or tapping my watch. And then I can have the spare change from that transaction automatically deposited into an investment account that is ran by a robo-advisor. And then at the end of the month, my paycheck or my credit card bill is automatically paid via my checking account, which is automatically funded via my paycheck and direct deposit. All of this works pretty seamlessly. Most importantly, it's safe and secure. Thus, we're able to trust this system. Now, I have to admit, we've had issues in TradFi in the past. We can look at 2008 and the financial crisis, or even earlier this year with the run on the banks at a few regional banks. But the point is, TradFi has continually evolved and adapted to make sure that it stays strong and that its users trust the system. And for those reasons, I think TradFi is here to stay. DeFi may be growing, but there is no way in the world that it replaces our traditional financial system.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think pretty strong statements from both of them. My jury is still out. My opinion hasn't been formed yet. Like, look at me. I have my phone, I have iPad, I have my notepad, and a clicker. And by the way, microphone. So I have every technology there is here to make myself comfortable. So my jury is still out on who's going to win this argument. So we're going to go very quickly in the arguments right now. John, are you ready to defy the
Absolutely.
DeFi?
Absolutely. Okay, so in my opening, I said not only does DeFi have what it takes to replace TradFi, but I stated that there's already an ecosystem out there thriving. So I'm going to walk through a couple pieces in order to really kind of illustrate that. Let's start with the most well-known use of blockchain. Let's be clear, blockchain's a technology, cryptocurrency is a use case, but let's start with crypto then. I think as of this morning, there's approximately somewhere between 1.2, 1.4 trillion dollars in total value if you compare it to USD, and I know that that's a weird way to kind of think through it, but the value is roughly 1.3 trillion. Now, what do you need to actually connect within DeFi or even a blockchain is generally what's referred to as a digital wallet. And so here's where you can kind of see some adoption. If you go back to the end of 2015, I think it was around 3.5 million wallets attached to Bitcoin. So, right, just the first to arrive on the scene, just one. At the end of last year, it was about 85 million. We're looking at about a 2,600% increase in a very roughly short time frame. So just trying to lay out that not only are there users, but the adoption is beginning to increase. The second piece I want to talk about is what's referred to as a DEX, or a decentralized exchange. Sometimes I hear this really boiled down to say, oh, it's like a Forex market. You're just going to trade, USD for British pounds and back and forth. Well, okay, maybe, but at the same time, really the whole blockchain and crypto universe is a lot more than just a value of one piece. You have so many other concepts going on within it, including governance tokens, stable coins, but just thinking through the overall value within, value within, the value within.
About that.
The value within should lead me to my next statement, so I appreciate everybody taking their time within there. So DEXs, right? So you're not only exchanging one token for another, but you can actually work through different fractionalized assets and digitalized assets within that as well. Last but not least, you have the yield farming and lending protocols, in which do exactly kind of what they sound like. You can, in order to stake your currency within there in order to receive returns, right? So I've just kind of laid out that we can replace with DeFi traditional finance products, saving, lending, borrowing, all of those pieces together. I'm not talking about replacing the products, I'm talking about replacing the technology in order to execute it.
Thank you, John. And speaking about the value, so let's hear what Ben has to say about that value within.
Awesome. Thanks, Zoya. That was pretty complicated. I don't need to explain to you guys all the use cases of TradFi. You guys use them and you know them, and hopefully you love them. But I do want to scope the conversation to what exactly TradFi is. When we talk about TradFi, we're talking about the underlying currency, the banks that store that currency, our payment rails, our insurance to protect us, capital markets, regulation, on and on. Each of these capabilities has been stress tested over the course of the last however many decades. In order for DeFi to successfully replace TradFi, it needs to successfully replace each one of these capabilities. That's a pretty tall task. Now, John referred to what I think he thinks is a kind of large number, and funnily enough, when we practiced this, he said the crypto market cap was 1.8 trillion, so apparently it's updated to 1.4, which I think helps prove my point. But nonetheless, I want to compare that to some actually large numbers. So the global equities market is $90 trillion. But we're supposed to scope this conversation to the United States, so I will scope my numbers. The US equities market is $45 trillion. The US banking and asset management sectors combined for $60 trillion. So when John says that DeFi is knocking on the door of TradFi and ready to take it down, he's not correct. DeFi isn't even in the ballpark of TradFi. DeFi is in parking lot Z, waiting for a ticket to get into the event. And then putting aside value for a second, let's talk usability. Not sure if you've all used the blockchain or not, but it's actually a rather emotional and stressful process. And that's because when you send a transaction on the blockchain, you know that that transaction is immutable. You can't fix that. If you made a mistake, there's no helpline you can call, no insurance, no FDIC to back you up to redo that transaction. So when you hit send, you start to doubt yourself. On the Bitcoin network, it can take up to 10 minutes for that transaction to settle. You start to doubt yourself. You start to think, did I make a mistake? Did I type something in wrong? So it's very stressful. So I think with the lack of value in DeFi and the lack of trust we have using the technology, I have real doubts when John says that DeFi is here to take over TradFi.
Thank you, Ben. Heavy hitters here. I think we're going to contest the 1.3 trillion value. And Ben here is arguing that traditional finance is simple. Well, I'm doing eye roll, but I'm supposed to be impartial here. So we're going to move to the second argument, whether DeFi truly solves the TradFi issue. So, John, the stage is yours.
Okay, when I look at traditional finance and I see what DeFi has to offer it, I focus on four key concepts. The centralized control, the inefficiency of settlement, the limited access of individuals globally or locally to be able to use it, and the transparency in which it operates through. So the centralized authority piece. Quickly think through both the government and large institutions and their ability to manipulate the monetary supply within it. Monetary supply impacts inflation. And none of this is truly transparent for the individual users of this currency. We didn't choose for them to go ahead and add more supply. This simply just keeps coming about. working from the centralized control into the concept of the inefficiency of instant settlement. He did mention that it takes up to 10 minutes through Bitcoin in order to settle. Just to be very clear, there's already a Lightning Network that you can open up a peer-to-peer connection. Those transactions are done in seconds. You just simply provide liquidity. So I just have to, little point of correction there. But the concept that, let's just say, settling in equity, it's T plus days, right? It's days. That's just simply unacceptable in this day and age. And I understand that real-time payments have come about in 2017 for peer-to-peer individuals. Let's just be real. The only reason that's there is in 2009, Bitcoin came out and literally showed them, hey, look, this is coming for you. You better respond. And how long did it take? Just throwing that out there. Stepping into the limited access piece, 20% of the US is considered underbanked or unbanked. That's a large percentage. And I understand that sometimes people say, oh, 80-20 rule, we got it covered with 80%. Well, no, even those that are at an institution that have an account, if they're not in that 20%, continue to add the concept of, well, do they have access to everything within the traditional financial system? No, right? You do not, because you're not in the wealth management. You're not in the wealth tech side of it in order to be able to get the best opportunities, right? The idea that if I get a charged off account at Bank of America, I can't open up an account at Wells Fargo. Right? They've seen that, oh, I wasn't able to be trusted, so I had to move forward. Jumping into the idea of the transparency that's created by the blockchain technology related to the actual transactions that occur. This is one of those pieces that I can't really frame well enough to even show how important it is, that I don't have to take it or leave it with a top 10 institution in what they want me to do regardless. I can now shop around within the entire decentralized network or decentralized environment, ecosystem of partners through the dApps that are purpose-built in order to execute how I want to and how I need to. So just thinking through those four things, right? The centralized control, the inefficiency of the settlement process, limited access to those that need it, as well as the transparency of what actually occurs on that system.
Okay. Gosh, I keep doing that. So John brought up this idea of this control by these centralized organizations. That control is oh so important for any financial system, because that control is what gives the system safety and security and thus allows the users to trust the system. The centralized organizations obfuscate the complexities of all of the transactions that we do. My example of paying with my phone, there's a lot of complexities downstream from that. It's the organizations who obfuscate that. Also, the government and the regulators, they are the ones keeping us safe. It is important for the users of the system to feel like there is a third party outside of their financial institutions watching their back. John talked about transparency. This one's my favorite because, yes, the blockchain is transparent. It is so transparent that if you send me a transaction, I can take your public key and I can go into a website like Etherscan. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. On Etherscan, I can type in your public key, hit enter, and I can see all of the tokens that you have in your wallet, the values of all of those tokens, and every transaction you have ever performed with that wallet. Now, that is most definitely transparent, but I don't know if that's the transparency we want in our financial institutions. And then something John hasn't referred to is the service side of these industries. So if you have a problem with a decentralized application, you can't call it up like your bank. You can't talk to a certified financial advisor. You have to read a white paper, go to YouTube, go to Twitter or Discord if you know what that is, and then you ask a random stranger a question and you hope that they're telling you the truth when you get the answer. So yeah, I'll admit, DeFi is really cool, but does it really seem practical? I'm not sure it is.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, John. A lot to unpack here. I think we're all struggling with transparency versus how transparent do we want to be, and do we really want the big brother watching? Or maybe we just need to admit ourselves the big brother is watching, and there's no escaping if you want to be part of this society. So with that, let's go to the third argument and talk about the brand new world. And then we're going to wrap it up with a closing statement. John?
Okay. What I've tried to do is establish that DeFi already has an existing ecosystem. It's actually attacking what I would consider some of the largest failures that the TradFi system has out there. But for the most part, I've been talking kind of tit for tat. Well, we can replace saving, lending, borrowing, all of those pieces with, okay, we have an alternative, right? But that's not necessarily what really DeFi can bring if you decide to go full in, right? So the idea of just papering over a blockchain with traditional finance processes is not what I really want to talk about. What I really want to focus on is the idea that what it enables is open source capitalism. And before that scares anybody, what it creates is permissionless innovation. All the tools that I talked about that are executed through decentralized, through DeFi, they're created by peers throughout the world. This isn't one institution that created it and you have to use them, right? You can pick up, lift, and shift and go. It's not ingrained in the legacy tech debt that every traditional financial institution, quite frankly, unfortunately, is ingrained in. It's very difficult to try and move, shift, and lift into a new service or a system, or if you're just adding more competing payment rails, right? What I want to do is take another step here and understand that anything can become a digital asset. So let's just go run down this road with me real quick. My diploma, my mortgage, a car payment, all of it, it can be digitized. And before anybody says, how can that actually happen? You can't digitize my car. Well, you don't actually own your whole car if you have a car payment. So, in theory, you already have fractional ownership to begin with. So why not keep running with that? Back to the idea of the permissionless innovation, you continue to move through the understanding of, if I can tokenize digital assets, I can actually fractionalize them in order to disperse ownership, right? So the idea that one stock costs $360, but I only have $12, I was just listening to Stash talk about earlier today about how to actually invest in those pieces. This enables that at a whole different scale, faster, cheaper, more auditable, so that you don't have the out-of-time sinks that occur working through that piece. But the idea of tokenizing everything enables you to understand the value of everything, right? It's not just what you consider the dollars of your wealth, but also your personal information and where you spend money. And all those other pieces should be monetized for you to profit from, not from others. And so, in conclusion, working through what can you do if you really go full DeFi, right, is you can tokenize everything, unlock the value for individuals so they have the opportunity to participate anywhere they want without the legacy tech debt, as I said, that is ingrained in the traditional finance system.
All right. Third time's a charm on that. So we made it to the third argument, and I want to recap everything that John just said. He wants you to take everything you own, not just your money, tokenize it, and put it on the blockchain. To me, that is irresponsible of a statement, because what he's asking is you to take everything you own and put it into what is basically the wild, wild west of finance. Blockchain is a revolutionary technology. There's no doubts about that. But there's been many other revolutionary technologies: cloud, mobile, the internet. And every time one of those technologies came around, we didn't use it as an excuse to recreate an industry that is already functioning. We used it as a way to improve our current financial system. Think of blockchain as a new infrastructure layer. It's a technical oversimplification, but think of it as like a data store or a network that financial institutions can use. And that's exactly what they're doing. And John's not wrong. We can tokenize a lot of things. Asset managers today are trying to tokenize assets and funds so that they can take advantage of some of the features that John's talked about: peer-to-peer transactions, instant settlement, transparency into the data within the funds and the assets. But the important part is that these asset managers are already well-regulated, and that they are obfuscating the client's data from the masses, so we don't run into that transparency issue I talked about. We also see the use case of programmatic payments, which is basically just saying you can use smart contracts in the blockchain to automatically send a payment because of an external event. The example here would be a warehouse receives a part, they scan the QR code of that part, and that triggers a payment through the blockchain to the supplier. It's a accounts receivable, accounts payable thing. My point in saying all of this is that we're already on the right path. Financial institutions who are already well-regulated are finding ways to incorporate blockchain as an underlying technology within their business. We don't need to have everyone move into the wild, wild west that is DeFi.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, John. I think we have two pretty strong arguments here. One being that we are on the right path, but are we moving quickly enough, versus the permissionless innovation. is that what's going to take us to the next century? So before gentlemen do their closing statement, have any of you attended the Nachos Faster Payment event earlier this year? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, that's really sad. I'm just going to put it out there. So we learned while we were presenting at Faster Payments that apparently this little debate club has some groupies and people that come and see our sessions from conference to conference. So that was a fun, little piece of knowledge. So with that, we'll give gentlemen another 20 seconds before they do closing statements, and we'll make Greg Lloyd do a better job actually throwing more T-shirts to people, actually to the people instead of empty chairs. Also, you can bribe him later if
I
the
got you,
size
bud.
doesn't fit. He has multiple sizes, so make him work. So Greg, the floor is yours. Please, there you go. You have one groupie there. There you go. He is not doing a very good job today. I don't know what's happening. I picked him specifically because he was spectacular at
snags.
Faster Payments.
Yeah, we're probably going to have to ball these up. Use a
Yeah.
rubber band or
we,
something.
We have more, you guys, so because Greg is not doing a good job, just come on over after the session. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So with that, we're going to do the closing statements right now. And I know the schedule said that after that, we're going to do Q&A and then do closing polls. Well, we lied. We're running out of time because of the previous session, not that I'm blaming them or anything. So we're going to do closing statements, go straight into the poll, and for those of you that have questions, we will be around here after the session is over. So for the closing statements, we're doing something different, and we'll give John opportunity to have the last word since he championed the first word. So Ben, the floor is yours. Are you
Awesome.
ready?
Yeah, let's go. So I'm going to start off with just rebuting a couple of things that John said, then give you guys a good recap of my argument. So the one thing John talked about that I haven't responded to is banking the unbanked, which in the United States, most of the unbanked are minorities. It's a great ethos that DeFi and the crypto culture have, which is that they want to try to bank the unbanked. But I think that it's better in theory than in practice. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the 4 guys up here talking about crypto today have all been white males. In fact, the US, data within the US says that the average crypto user makes $110,000 a year. 75% of them are male and 70% of them are white. So that to me doesn't sound like banking the unbanked. That to me sounds like people, the industry is growing because of greed, not necessity. And then something else I talked about was trust. And trust is probably the most important part of any financial system. Without trust, you would basically have civil unrest. And DeFi isn't necessarily looking to be regulated. And I think regulation is a very important part of this trust piece, right? The users need to understand that there is a third party looking out and that has their back in order for them to trust the system. And I guess the other point would be, even if DeFi did want to be regulated, how do you regulate something that doesn't have an accountable body? I think that's a complex problem that no one's been able to solve yet. So to recap, centralized organizations and the government, the regulators, they are important because they are what provide the system with safety and security and thus trust. DeFi is most definitely growing, but it is bound to be a side ecosystem where relatively few play around in. And TradFi is integrated in our day-to-day lives. And I think decoupling that from our lives would have tremendous growing pains that I don't think any of us really want to experience. So for all of that reason, I believe that TradFi is here to stay, and that DeFi is just basically the wild, wild west of finance, and we don't have to worry about it taking all of our jobs.
All right, taking over from that, let's try and run through a couple pieces because I haven't really had time to defend myself as we've walked through this, as I've been trying to advance the agenda of the discussion. So the regulatory bodies that we put our full faith and trust in to make sure that they're going to take care of us have failed us countless times. It actually is self-serving. It does not actually look out for the individuals. If you're going back to concepts between, well, Silicon Valley Bank, okay, well, they were insured by FDIC, great, up to $250,000. Well, then they just started adding zeros behind that. Like, okay, I mean, I guess they're protecting someone. I don't know if that's protecting everybody that's involved in that particular currency, right? Working through the trust that's needed in order to transact. Well, the beauty of blockchain is the transparency. Transparency in order to interact without having to trust who's on the other end. Right? I don't have to know them in order to transact with them. Now the whole piece of, oh my God, I can look up your public key and I can go look through everything you've ever done. Well, it's a little bit harder than that. I mean, to his point, he is right. If I send you money and you have my public facing wallet key, you can go use an app to look up and see what my wallet holdings are and what transactions I've made. I think even EY is creating something in order to hide those individual transactions for an individual who's trying to actually participate in the ecosystem. There are ways around it, right? And this becomes, as we become more fluent with it, right? As the adoption rate continues to grow, you will begin to see the advancements that take care of any of these issues because of the permissionless innovation that surrounds the entire ecosystem related to decentralized finance. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Why don't we give them a big round of applause at this point? I think they proved their point. I opened the closing poll, so that's where you guys get to vote. And let's see what happens. I only see a couple of votes so far, so the suspense is killing me. Like I said before, if you guys want to stick around afterwards and ask us any questions, we're here. You know, no pressure, everybody. It's just the bragging rights between Endava and EY. No big deal, you know, all I'm saying. And then Greg is sitting there doing nothing, so if you really want the t-shirt and you didn't get it, raise your hand. He will gladly, personally hand deliver one. I think Shelly wants a t-shirt, Greg, and a couple of other people.
I promised one all the way to the back left too, Greg.
Yeah, no, it does say what we have about 16. Yeah. Refresh it. So all the arguments that you guys had in place, I think we swayed some arguments to the point that our original question, remember, is DeFi going to replace TradFi? And 80% of you say no. So round of applause for our participants staking their arguments in the best way.
Well
and
done.
again, remember, the point of these debates is not to show who is right or who is wrong. The point is for you to open your minds and think about the same issues in a variety of ways, and that's what we're here for. So again, thank you everybody for participating and all of you sending in the back as well. We will see you next time.
Meet us back here at 3:05 p.m. for our Class 18 demo day.